All right, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangouts. My name is John Mueller. I am a Webmaster Trends Analyst here at Google in Switzerland. And a part of what I do is talk with webmasters, publishers like all of you, to see what's on your mind, where you're seeing problems, where you have any questions, and to try to help answer those questions and bring the feedback back to our engineering team as well as we see things pop up. We have a bunch of new faces here in the Hangout. Do any of you want to introduce yourselves briefly?
I don't mind doing it. Okay. My name is Jérôme. I've been working for about 6 months to a year seriously on SEO. And I have a question, so can I go
Sure.
right now?
Yeah.
Okay. I've been running a little experiment to check what something has said on the internet, what someone has said on the internet. It's related to keyword stuffing. Basically, that person was saying that if you write a web page with natural text, like written by a human being, I'm not talking about Markov chains or automatically generated stuff or scrap things, and if you would include some valuable keywords like generating a lot of traffic or relevant to user query in that text, that would slip under the radar of Google. But and so the thing is that I've noticed that above a certain level amount of keywords on a page, the algorithm seems to frown a little and are not happy and do not trust that content anymore. So, do you confirm that even if keywords are hidden, what you say in natural text, there is a limit above which, algorithms think, yeah, no, this is too suspicious, it doesn't look natural, so we're not going to trust it?
Hard to say. So I think this is something where I'd really just aim to make sure that you have natural text on your pages that matches what you're trying to do and not try to put keywords in there. I think we have a bunch of algorithms that look at more than just the keyword frequency. So just by placing a couple keywords in a page that otherwise has other content on it doesn't necessarily mean that that'll rank for those keywords. So we look at over 200 factors when we look at these pages. So it's something where I think in an experiment, when you're looking at a page in isolation, you might be able to make it trigger one effect or another effect. But it's something where if you look at things in practice, that's not really the way you would make a website, and not really something where I'd say this is how you should do SEO. Essentially, when we look at pages, we try to recognize that the content there is really normal content that people could read, that we can understand as well, where we can pull the context of these keywords out and understand what the context of these words is in. So, for example, we need to do that when we have words that are kind of ambiguous. So, for instance, if you have the word golf, then obviously that could be the sport, it could be a car, it could be any number of things. So it's something where we need to figure out the context of this word within your pages and understand what this page is really talking about so that we can rank that page appropriately. So if you take a text, I don't know, if you take a copy of something from Shakespeare and you just randomly add additional keywords in there, then obviously that's going to rank for something, but it's not really going to help you to kind of rank for normal things that you'd like to rank for. So I kind of keep in mind when you're doing these kind of experiments, just because it does one thing with like a single page that you're ranking in search doesn't necessarily mean that this is something that you'd want to do on a normal website to rank normally.
Okay, so there's no excessive level of keywords, I mean, per se, there is no, if keyword stuffing, it really depends on the context too, whether, those words are relevant or not. I'm not talking about a list of words explicitly written on a page. I'm talking about stuff that is, you would say, hidden in natural text. You would not necessarily filter that out.
So it's definitely not something where we have a simple filter and say anything above, I don't know, 10, 15% keyword density is going to trigger a spam penalty or something like that. We try to really understand what this page is about, and sometimes you have to mention these keywords a lot of times, and that's the way the natural text is, or you have them in your menu, and you kind of mention it a lot of times there. Then that's something that we have to be able to deal with. It's not something where we can say, well, it's above 11%, therefore it'll be filtered automatically. So it's a lot more complex than just counting the words.
Hi, John.
Hi, Baruch.
So
Let's try to get some of the others in here as well. I don't know, Jeff, do you have any questions or anything?
Yeah, sure. Just to introduce myself real quick. I'm at Find the Best. It's an online research engine, and I've been doing with them for about 3 years. And to get to my question, we basically allow publishers to embed widgets, and these widgets include a branded iframe widget and also a backlink. And basically, publishers can remove the backlink if they wish, or they can no-follow it. And these widgets can be embedded either on a one-off basis, or they can be embedded via our API. So we did some research around the web to see what other large web platforms were doing, and we saw that Zillow and Yelp, when you go to their site, they include a follow link with their widgets, and then Trulia includes a no-follow link. And then in terms of their APIs, Zillow, Trulia, and Yelp, they include links or follow links, but you can no-follow them if you wish. So our two questions are basically, one, is it safe to follow links with widgets? And then two, if so, should the API be treated differently?
So I'm not quite sure how you mean with the API. How would you
So similar to how Yelp has an API that you can pull their review data, we also have an API that will allow people to supplement their data. So one example that we're doing is real estate. There's a bunch of real estate sites that don't actually have all the data, and then they can just pull our data straight into their site.
Okay. So in general, I'd caution against putting followed links into widgets at all. So that's something where you're kind of building a big liability if you have all of these followed links around, where essentially cleaning it up is going to be a lot of work if you needed to do that at some point. Disavowing them is also a lot of work. So it's something where if you're putting out new widgets, I'd really kind of move away from putting followed links in there at all, just so that you're really on the safe side, that you're not building any kind of unnatural link scheme with your widgets there at all. So with that in mind, I'd definitely also do that for the API as well. And if of course people want to link to your site and they do that separately from the widget, then that's their link. That's not something you can really prevent, but I'd really shy away from just putting that into widget by default.
Okay, just to talk a bit more about this, we did talk with Gary Ilias, and we basically, he somewhat understood the challenge. So basically, if a publisher embeds a widget, it does show some authority on our end, and then I guess the challenge is just that the actual widget doesn't provide any sort of authority. So the only way that Google's actually giving us authority and giving us some sort of citation is through the link. So I suppose that's where the kind of tension is on our end.
Yeah, but I mean, essentially what you're trying to do is get these followed links by exchanging them with the widget, right? That's kind of what you're trying to do in that situation, and that's kind of like a link exchange. You're giving one thing and expecting a followed link in exchange back, and that's something that we're trying to figure out how we can handle that appropriately on our side. And for the most part, our algorithms would tend to ignore that or even treat that as an unnatural link. And at some point, that might be a liability for your site. So if you're moving forward with these widgets, I'd really recommend that you no-follow those links as much as possible by default.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Who else do we have in here who's relatively new? Does anyone want to jump on in, ask something?
Hey, John, I have a strange happening that seems to be some kind of technical relation that I wanted to see if we could get some guidance on. With the mobile rollout, we had been mobile friendly for several months, so we decided as the mobile rollout was coming to use the PageSpeed insights to try to optimize even further. My partner Jeff had sent you the weird bug we found with it. But after we implemented a lot of these changes, which mostly involve trying to speed up CSS and speed up the site in general, within a few days after that, we saw some rather significant, in some places, drop-offs on some of our keyword rankings. And simultaneous with that, the dates in the search results seemed to revert back to the original published date instead of the most recently updated date. And we had done all these changes within about a 3-day period. So we're just trying to figure out what we might have done that seems to have broke something or confused something, because like in a couple of cases, we actually fell from like first page to omitted results and then came back into the first or second page a few days later. And during this time period, we made no changes to the content. It was all back-end technical CSS, that kind of thing. So just wanted to see if you had any thoughts on what we could look into.
That's kind of hard, because you probably need to look into the details of what specifically happened there. So if you're saying that you made like technical changes on a page and dropped in results temporarily, then to me that would sound like there was some technical issues, maybe with crawling and indexing the pages. But it's really hard to tell without actually looking at the specific URLs. So if you want, you can send me maybe a Google Plus post with the information. I can take a look at that. But my guess is if it settled down again in the right way, then you're probably on the safe side and things are okay now. I don't know, if I just had to like randomly guess, then I assume that because you made changes across your whole website, we tried to crawl a lot of content from your server, and maybe we overloaded your server and saw some errors from that. So, I mean, this is without actually looking at your website, so it could be something completely different. But from what you described, that seems like something that could have happened. And if you remove the CSS, then I think that's something that we'll end up having to crawl less in the future, because we can focus on fewer CSS files and actually see and render your whole content normally. So that's a great thing looking forward. But these kind of bigger changes, when you make bigger changes to your template, all of those things, it just means we recognize there's significant changes on the site, and we try to recrawl everything as quickly as possible so that we understand the new status as early as possible. And that might, I don't know, have triggered something on your server where the server says, oh my gosh, this looks like some kind of a rogue bot that's trying to scrape our content, and maybe blocked us temporarily or something like that. I'm happy to take a look to see if it was really just something like that, or I don't know, more actionable on your side that you could change or fix that maybe cause problems on our side temporarily. But from just your comments there, that'd be kind of what I'd point at.
Okay, thanks, John.
All right, we have some other new faces here. Pete, do you want to ask any questions? Anything specific on your mind?
Hey, John. Yeah, I do have one question. It's in the Q&A already. Do you want me to ask it now, or wait till it comes up? Or?
Go for it.
Yeah, sure. So I've seen in the vertical that I work in quite a few big brands setting up landing pages. So this is brands that haven't previously worked in the space, but they seem to have just decided we want to slice this pie. And a lot of people have been pushed down as they rank up, but I can't see any sort of external signals. It seems to be purely on brand authority that they're ranking. I don't see how this is a fair system, really. I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
So basically, these are big websites that are starting off in a new niche, something like that?
Yeah, so they'll pretty much they'll pretty much set up a single landing page on their website with a bunch of keywords. We do this service, and they'll capture the people's details. So they're not really offering the service; they're just capturing leads and selling them on. I don't know if Google has any way of detecting if it's just like a one-page with an inquiry form or this sort of thing, if it's a problem you're aware of, or I don't know.
I guess this is something we'd have to look at the specifics for and kind of get some examples, some queries where you're seeing this happening, some of the pages where you're seeing this happening, so that we can pass that on to the source quality teams to figure out what we might be able to do to improve that situation. It's really hard to tell in general because sometimes it makes sense to show these pages. So if a really popular company starts off in a new market area, then maybe they have a good product that they've been working on that deserves to kind of rank somewhere in those search results. Maybe that's something that needs to settle down over time, where we need to figure out, well, this is a really popular car manufacturer, and now they're selling bicycles. Where do we put them in the bicycle search results? But that's something where we probably need to look at specific queries and the pages themselves to understand what actually is happening here and how can we speed it up so that it settles down in the right way as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I suppose the main problem I had was that there wasn't any sort of external signals that I could see. I didn't like. Is this something Google intentionally does, that if someone's got enough authority or trust, then you assume they will be an authority in this new space, or?
No, not by default. So it's not something where we'd say, well, I don't know, this is CNN and they have an article on, I don't know, bicycle shoes, then therefore this article will automatically rank #1 for anyone trying to buy bicycle shoes. So it's not something that should by default be happening, but I can imagine that maybe if a really well-known site kind of enters a new market, then maybe it makes sense to take that into account. But it really, I guess it kind of depends on what all is happening there. So for example, I don't know, take Apple and their Apple Watch, where basically they haven't had a smartwatch at all, but they're entering this market, and because they kind of fit in there, that's something where we'd say, well, if someone is searching for a smartwatch, maybe they would want to look at the Apple options as well, because that's something that kind of fits in here. We don't really have that much experience with Apple smartwatches and their search results, but it's something that would fit in there, and it would actually kind of help the user to have that in there. But again, it really depends on the specifics. So if you want, you can send me a note on Google Plus with some of the queries where you're seeing this, some of the pages where you're seeing this happening, maybe screenshots if you think that they're changing quickly, and we can discuss that with the search quality team to see what we could be doing better.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for your feedback.
Sure. All right. Let me run through a bunch of the questions that were submitted already, and I'll go back to questions from all of you as well. What do we have here? Okay. When a company acquires multiple companies and websites, and those sites all rank in the top 10 for the same key terms, selling the same services, what is Google's stance on this? It removes diversity in choice and is happening right now. Large brands do this. So this is definitely something that we worry about and something that we look into examples for. So I think you've sent me some examples, Gary. If there are other examples that you run across with your website or with other websites, it would be great to have those, and we can take a look at that as well. In general, I think it's important to keep in mind that just because a company has maybe 2 or 3 websites doesn't mean that they should never show up in the search results at the same time. Maybe it makes sense to show them separately. So it might be that the different websites are focusing on different target audiences or have completely different product lines, and these are things that might make sense to show in the search results at the same time, even if ultimately they come from the same company. So it's not something where I'd say this should never happen, and every time it happens we would see that as spam and penalize the site. Sometimes it happens, sometimes there are good reasons behind this, and we need to find the right balance in between there. So it definitely doesn't make sense to show all 10 results from the same site, but sometimes it makes sense to show more than one result from the same site. So somewhere in between there's a balance that we need to hit, and sometimes it also depends on the query, sometimes it depends on lots of other options. So this is something where if you're seeing problems with this, by all means let us know about that. You can also use a feedback form on the bottom of the search results. That's something that also goes to our search quality team. And if there are really specific examples where you're seeing this that you can't easily explain on the feedback form, you're always welcome to forward those to me, and I'll pass those on to the search quality team too.
Like the one I sent you, John. I appreciate that. It's finally happened.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is something where there is a balance somewhere between like one and all of them, and sometimes it makes sense to take action on that. Sometimes it's something where we have to say, well, this is just kind of the way it is at the moment, and it'll settle down over time. Or maybe it's the case that there's some algorithm that we know is coming up at some point where we say, well, we don't want to manually take action on this at the moment because we know in a month we're launching this new algorithm that should handle this a lot better automatically, and then we'll maybe wait for a month and keep this as a data point to keep in mind when we test that algorithm and say, well, instead of solving this one problem here, we're actually solving it across the board for hundreds or millions of sites. After the launch of mobile-friendly website update, how will we check impressions and clicks on our mobile app? Is there any function of that in Webmaster Tools? So I guess one of the questions here I'd have is what you mean with a mobile app. If that's your mobile website, if that's essentially the mobile-friendly version of your page, you can definitely do that in Webmaster Tools. We should be launching the new search analytics feature relatively soon. Some of you have been trying that out. I think that gives you a little bit more insight into how mobile users are using your website and how they're finding it, the clicks and impressions, the queries that are leading to the mobile pages or coming from mobile users. So that definitely gives you a lot of information there. If you have an app that you have linked in with your website using app indexing, then that's something where we're working on various options there as well. And recently I sent out a questionnaire or a sign-up form where if you're using app indexing, you can let us know and we'll sign you up on some tests that we're working on. So if you're using app indexing, if you have an Android app, for example, and tie that to your website, trying that out might be a fun thing to do. Sites embed our content using code that includes an iframe widget and a backlink. Okay, I think we talked about this briefly. So essentially, I really shy away from putting followed links into widgets. I see big sites enter markets with one-page affiliate landing pages. We've talked about this briefly. You stated click to expand content may be discounted and may not rank. We use this technique to show users the important products first and expanded text is supplemental. Is this page penalized at all? Is the content not going to rank? Is it ignored? So we've been essentially doing this for a really long time now. It's not something really new that if the content is hidden on the page, if we don't see it directly, then we'll kind of discount it in search. It's not that we penalize the website. We won't penalize this specific page for that. It's not going to be seen as lower quality content in any sense. But essentially, if someone is searching for something generic and this page comes up, then that's something where we'll say, well, this isn't the primary content of this page, and we'll try to rank it appropriately. So if this is the only page that has this content and it's behind the click to expand area, we'll definitely still show that in search. It's something that makes sense to show. But if there are a lot of other pages out there that do have this content as primary content on their page, then we'll try to show those pages first. So that's essentially what we're trying to do there. It's not that we're penalizing these sites. It's not that we're going to demote these pages in search. Essentially, we're trying to figure out what the primary content is of this page and say, well, for this primary content, this is what you're trying to rank for, and all of this other information here, you called it supplemental, is supplemental. It's something we additionally have for this page, but it's not the primary content that we'd say, well, this page needs to rank for. How Google analysis backlink profile to a site is at root level or page level. When I removed weak or bad links via disavowed file? How does Google treat those removed links, and can we see an uplift on a page level? Do we need to do a monthly link audit? So most of our web spam algorithms do look at it on a site level, so it's not something that we look at it on a per page level. But of course, the links go to individual pages, and we kind of collect that as PageRank for those individual pages. So if there's a link to a page, then we might pass PageRank to that page and treat that appropriately in search. If you have something where these links are problematic, where essentially a web spam algorithm is affecting these links, this site because of those links, then that's something that'd be on a site level. If you use a disavow file, then essentially what happens is the next time we crawl that page and we see that it's listed in a disavow file, we'll drop that link from our systems. Regarding doing a link audit on a monthly basis, I think that's something you can look at on a per-site basis. It's definitely not something that I'd say the majority of the mainstream websites really need to do. Even small businesses, generally, they don't need to do that. If you're not actively promoting your site with weird link schemes, then that's not something where I'd say you need to do a link audit regularly to kind of stay up to date with things. So. And of course, if you are promoting your website using weird link schemes or buying links, those kind of things, then usually it's easier to just stop doing those kind of links and to focus on your normal content, promoting your website in a normal way, than to just regularly try to clean that up after setting those unnatural links up. We've got a desktop and a mobile site. The configuration using real alternate rel canonical works. Which domain, desktop or mobile, should we connect to the app within Google Webmaster Tools for app deep linking? Essentially, you can hook up both of them because you have the canonical set up to the desktop site. I think the general advice in our Help Center is to link at the mobile version of the page. So practically speaking, you can use either one, and we generally recommend using the mobile version, though. On which domain, desktop or mobile, should we integrate the app alternate tag? You can put that on both of those pages if you want. You can just put it on a desktop page. You can just put it on the mobile page. Essentially, all of that works. We recommend tying it in, again, with the mobile version of your site, but it should work with all of them. How does Google treat an internal 301 no index page, which is a search query to an index page? In other words, we have a few search query pages, which I guess they're under no index, and need to do in 301 to an index page. I don't quite understand the question, but in general, if a page 301 redirects to a different page, then that redirecting page doesn't have any content that we can pick up on, so we don't see what's on that page if it's redirecting somewhere else. And if we do see a redirect there, then we'll take that into account what we find on the destination page. So even if you have a chain of redirects from one page to another, we won't be able to pick up any of the content on the server-side redirecting pages, and instead we'll focus on the final destination page where the user is presented with the content in the browser as well. So if you kind of have different index pages with a no index meta tag and pages with an index robots meta tag, then we'll try to focus on the page that's essentially the final destination of that redirect chain. And regarding good or bad from an SEO point of view, it's essentially up to you. It's a technical tool that you can use. Sometimes it makes sense to keep pages in the index. Sometimes it makes sense to put a no index on them if you don't want to have them shown up in the search results. For example, if you know that something is kind of a lower quality page or doesn't have any information, or maybe is an internal search results page that doesn't have any results actually, then putting a no index on there is perfectly fine. It'll prevent that page from being indexed like that in the search results. What or who is the best way to create a mobile-friendly site? That's a fairly broad question. That's really something where I don't think there's one single answer to that. We have a lot of information in our mobile-friendly sites documentation where there are various options there. So if you have an existing CMS, maybe you can just switch it over yourself. Maybe you can just switch to a different theme, a different layout that works on a mobile-friendly in a mobile-friendly way. Maybe it makes sense to contact a web designer to make a mobile-friendly version of your site. It really depends on what you have at the moment and how far you want to go. There are a lot of different options there. And some of them might be free, some of them might be really expensive. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve and how far you want to go. I've come across a few instances of pages where regional URL, so en-ca for English in Canada, is indexed, but showing the meta content of a different region, for example, en-us. Looking at the page, the en-ca cache is showing the en-us page. Is there any reason for this? There are no odd redirects. So this is one of the situations where I'd make sure that you have the rel alternate hreflang markup set up. I don't know if this is something in this specific case that was already done, but that's something that really helps us there. So essentially what's happening is we're recognizing that these pages are essentially equivalent, and without any additional information about those pages, we might assume that they're actually the same page. And then we'll show them in the search results like you saw them there. So that's often the case when you look at a cache page and you see actually a different URL showing in the cache, then that's a kind of a sign that we thought these pages were actually equivalent or almost identical, maybe completely identical, and we folded them into one version for our search results. So in a case like this, if you have the Canadian and the US version and they're folded together, on the one hand, I'd make sure that you use the hreflang markup, that you make sure that the hreflang markup is actually implemented correctly, because if it's not implemented correctly, we'll tend to ignore it. And finally, what I'd still recommend doing is making sure that these pages at least have some unique content of their own so that they're kind of really targeting that area. Otherwise, if they're essentially equivalent and equivalent for the user as well, they show the same information, then it doesn't really matter which version we actually show in the search results because users get their same information from both of them, right? So in a case like that, I'd really make sure hreflang is set up properly, and as much as possible, make sure that you actually have unique and local information on those pages too. We saw a huge number of video sitemap URLs kicked out of the index after we added a lot of new videos. It took about 2 months for everything to be re-indexed. We're about to switch to SSL only. If we update sitemaps to have HTTPS links, will this happen again? It's possible. It's not something that I can completely exclude. In general, when it comes to video and image content and any kind of non-HTML content, we tend to be a little bit more cautious with our recrawling. So we probably won't recrawl and re-index those pages as quickly as possible, as quickly as like normal HTML pages, because usually they don't change that frequently. So if you move all of the embedded content to different URLs, even if that's just HTTPS, then you're likely to see kind of this drop during the time from when we lose track of which URL is actually embedded where, and until the time then we have figured out, okay, well, all of these URLs are actually here in the HTTPS version, and we need to kind of reconfigure things internally and make sure that we understand where everything is and where it's headed. So especially with videos and images, that's something where I'd expect to see a kind of a drop like this when you make site moves or any kind of URL changes.
So if I can take this, that was my question. So we actually saw the main issue seemed to be that we switched on a whole lot of old videos that we'd had problems with getting accurate stream durations for, and you need durations for video sitemaps. So actually we kind of inserted a whole load of content into our early video sitemap files, and everything got pushed along. So we ended up with a couple more sitemap files that were full, and everything jumped out of order. But we saw that the non-video index, because Webmaster Tools breaks out the video index and the non-video index. So basically all the URLs were re-added almost instantly to the non-video index, but getting re-added to the video index, even though no URLs had changed, we just added URLs, took, about 2 months. So it's one of those things where it's not entirely clear what the problem was. So it's,
I'd assume if the URLs stayed the same, and if you're just adding more metadata, that they wouldn't fall out. So my guess would be that maybe something small changed with the URLs. But especially the second part of your question, when you're asking about a move to HTTPS, that's essentially going to be a change in the URLs again. So if you're really focused on these videos, or if you have a lot of images on your page that are showing up in image search, and you're moving across like that, changing the URLs, then that's just something to kind of keep in mind, that you are going to see a drop for some time until we can re-index everything and understand, well, this landing page is associated with this video or this image file, and we've been able to recrawl the images. We've followed maybe a redirect from the old videos or the old images to new videos or new images, and this is a process that takes a lot longer for non-HTML content. And obviously, we'd like to improve this, make this faster, but at least at the moment, it's something where you kind of have to take that into account and say, well, I've moved all my HTML content. It moved over within maybe a week or so, and Google updated everything. But the rest of the content, I shouldn't assume that it'll be visible in the same speed.
Yeah, I think we're going to make that move on a per sitemap file basis now. So it's only going to be kind of 10,000 URLs at a time.
Yeah.
Do it over a period of weeks, and hopefully it'll be less traumatic than last time.
I think what also helps is to have a redirect from the old versions to the new versions. That's something we see a lot with images, or even with CSS files, that sometimes gets missed, where we'll have one version indexed at the moment, and the landing page refers to a new image URL, but actually the old image URL doesn't redirect to the new image URL. That's something that is kind of hard to test, because you're looking at the new landing page with the new image URL, and that looks great. But we do try to recrawl the old image URLs, and we expect this redirect to the new ones.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what we'll do is we'll just switch a blanket HTTP to HTTPS redirect on across the site, because I mean, all the URLs are identical. They're served currently both by HTTP and HTTPS. And then just start to tell you on a per sitemap basis, like actually, the canonical URL is HTTPS, not HTTP. And do that in a series of steps.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, it's always a tricky situation when you're looking at non-HTML content. We're pretty good with HTML content in site moves now, but it's not something where I can say, well, you just switch it over on a Friday, on a Monday it'll be okay. You might want to look for a time where you say, well, traditionally we don't have that much search traffic over the summer or over these holidays, so maybe we best do it then. But I guess that's something you're aware of now, so you'll take that into account.
Thanks.
All right, let me grab a few more questions here, because a whole bunch of them are submitted, and then I'll switch over to full Q&A with the rest of you. Is mobile-friendly search still rolling out? We're still seeing a lot of non-mobile-friendly sites figuring high in the search results. This is essentially fully rolled out now. So this is something where you should be able to see some results. I think the tricky aspect here is, of course, that this is a fairly broad change. So while we think this has a fairly high impact, it's not something that you would see in all search results where all non-mobile friendly pages suddenly disappear into, I don't know, page 500 of the search results. It's kind of a subtle change, but it's very broad. Can you give us a solution for Google Analytics not provided data? I've tried many web analytics platforms. No one can convert the not provided data they show me. There is no solution to the refer data in search. Essentially, this data isn't sent to your server at all, so no analytics platform can really pull that data out from the referrer anymore. We do show a lot of this information in Webmaster Tools in the search queries feature, and we've seen some analytics tools that kind of integrate the search query data with the analytics data and try to estimate things and figure out how things work there. So it's not something where there is any real solution to getting this referrer back for your website. It's essentially in Webmaster Tools in aggregated form now, and if you want to combine the two for your analytics, then that's something you kind of have to do manually or have to do with any kind of a tool that combines those two data sets. In October 2014, blog post update on RSS and XML sitemaps ping and PubSub update methods are discussed, but I've been unable to find official links to these endpoints. What are they, and could the links be made more obvious? I think they're listed with the PubSub hub documentation that we have, where the official hub is listed there, and that should be fairly findable for someone who's using PubSub hub. But I'll take that on and double check with the team to see if we can do something there to make that easier findable. How can I change the link from Google search for a specific keyword? My link is on the first Google search results page, and I don't want to lose the link. How can I redirect the old page to a new page without losing the rank on the first page? We have fairly extensive site move documentation that gives you a lot of information on how you can move from one URL to another, or if you're moving your server from one server to another, what you need to watch out for. So I check out our Help Center for the site move documentation. Webmaster Tools needs a tool to tell Google what page to send customers to for certain keywords. This will make my customer experience much better. My London key terms still go to my home page when it's clear my London page is infinitely better to service them. That's good feedback to have. At the moment, I don't think we have any plans on adding such a feature to Webmaster Tools directly. But it's interesting feedback to get from you. I'll double check with the team what they know about with regards to your site specifically, since you mentioned that as an example. So as always, having clear examples is something that helps us a lot to figure out where we need to guide things to which teams internally to kind of talk to when it comes to questions like these. How to canonicalize a co-branded website served from a subdomain but having almost the same content as a particular section from the main domain. So otherbrand.example.com, same as example.com. Do we let Google decide or canonicalize to the main website? If these are essentially equivalent pages, you can definitely set up a rel canonical between those pages. If you don't want to set up a rel canonical, or if you don't think that they're really equivalent, then having both of them might be fine too, and kind of offloading that decision to Google if you want. But especially if you're sure that this is essentially equivalent content, then I'd go ahead and put the rel canonical on there so that it's really clear. As much as possible when it comes to SEO, one of my tips is to not hope that search engines make the same decision that you would make, but rather if there's something that you really prefer on your side and you want search engines to do that, then make sure that all of the signals are really consistent and that search engines can really pick that up without having to kind of read your mind or interpret what you're trying to say. So if you have one page that you want to have indexed like that, then make sure that the rel canonical is set to that, and make sure that it's not redirecting to a different page. So really, as much as possible, be as clear as possible with your intents so that search engines don't have to interpret what you provide them. And if you can do that, then chances are we'll pick it up and handle it the way that you'd want to have it handled. Are interactive and useful web-based tools like jQuery considered to be duplicate content when they appear at the end of multiple pages with unique content? For example, cover letter example, and unique content, 800 plus words, followed by a tool, generic cover letter tips. I don't really see the relationship between the content and the tool regarding jQuery or not. But essentially, if you have content on a page and you have more information on a page using a tool or whatever else that you provide on these pages, that sounds like a good thing to do. That's not something where I try to hold you back from doing that. But at the same time, if this is a block of text or a tool that you have duplicated across your website, then I wouldn't assume that it'll get a lot more traction that way. But instead, what will happen is we'll see that this block of text or this tool is duplicated across your website and try to figure out which of these pages is actually kind of the canonical version that we should show for someone searching for this tool. So if someone is searching for a tool you have across your whole website, we'll probably pick one of your pages and show that in the search results. For that query, we won't show all of them. All right. With 10 minutes left to go, let's jump over to more live questions. I see people chatting and waving their hands, so I'm sure something. Yeah, go for it.
Hi, John. I have a question for you.
Okay.
It's regarding a site with the exact match domain. So initially the site had maybe about 4 or 5 pages. The site was still in development. And it was ranking fairly well, like the second or third page. And then after some time, we see a huge drop, and it's dropped to about 166 at the moment. It's a fairly low competition keyword. So we're assuming that it's some sort of algorithm that's hit it. The site only has about 10 links so far. 50% of these links are relevant links, and the other links are like general bot links and so forth. Can you give me any advice on recovering from this? There's no manual action or anything.
It's really hard to say without actually looking at the pages. So in general, an exact match domain doesn't mean that we'll show it in search for those keywords in that domain. On the almost contrary, what we do sometimes is if we recognize that it's an exact match domain and the content is kind of lower quality, then we might assume that this is kind of a spammy website. But that's really based on the content quality itself. That's not something where I'd say you have an exact match domain, therefore it'll never show up in search. But I just caution away from assuming that an exact match domain will assume it'll rank for search, because that's not always the case. You might have all of the keywords in your domain name and it still won't show up in search. That's not, we look into a lot more factors than that. So my guess there would be that I consider working on the content instead of just focusing on the domain and on the existing rankings. And I wouldn't assume that it's something that'll automatically pop back up. Instead, I try to figure out what you can do to improve the quality of the content across the board so that we can recognize this is something that's really relevant and really important that we should show in search.
Okay, I wanted to ask you a question about the mobile update. I'm still seeing results in mobile that are not mobile friendly. So, for instance, very spammy queries that don't display the mobile friendly tag.
Yeah, that's. I mean, we didn't filter all non-mobile friendly pages from search results.
Coming soon.
So that's not something that I think makes sense, because there's a lot of really good content that's just not mobile friendly.
Oh,
but it is a ranking factor, and it does have a kind of a significant effect there, but it's not the case that all non-mobile friendly pages would disappear from the mobile search results.
Every just wanted to know if there was an update. What happened this update?
This weekend, I don't know of anything specific there. I mean, we make changes all the time.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, John, a real quick question regarding dates on the pages. Currently, we have the original published date and then the latest update date on all of our pages. Should we have both of those dates on there? And if not, which date would the algorithm prefer that it sees on there?
If you have something that's date specific, I definitely at least put a date on it. But if you have the update date and the original content date, then that's something where maybe it makes sense to have both of those on the page as well. And I think what might happen is we might switch between those dates at some point in the search results when we show them. But that's not something where I'd say, well, because we show a different date, you need to suppress one or the other. I think that's something that kind of settles down with the algorithms over time. But at least having a date on there certainly makes sense. We see that a lot with even news websites where they'll publish a news article and they'll just put as a date maybe Friday on top of the page. And when we crawl that page, we don't really know what this Friday means. So having a date on there in some kind of a readable format, I think always makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, John.
Yeah.
Tien Nguyen in the chat is asking a question about if there was a Panda or other significant update last week that you could mention.
We didn't update anything there, not that I'm aware of at least. So I saw Barry's blog post about some changes he was seeing on the weekend, but that's not related to Panda or Penguin. I mean, we essentially make updates all the time, so these are changes as normal.
Okay, because it's like much bigger. It was a bigger effect than ever. I saw it.
I guess it depends on how you look at that, what you measure, what your tools are measuring there. So that's really hard for me to say what specifically you're seeing there.
Okay. Another question I had is about people have been noticing recently what they're referring to as emoji spam. Do you think that that would be a problem if webmasters were to see that, you know, if you put 5 stars in front of your name or in front of it in a query, that will appear in the search text as, you know, 5 yellow stars. Can you foresee that being a problem if people were to use that?
I thought that looked really cool when I saw the first pages that were using that, but I think it's really easy to overdo that, and probably something we'll have to take action on at some point. And by taking action, I don't think we'll like manually demote these sites that are using it, but rather we'll figure out a way to just filter those symbols out of the search results and say, well, we won't be displaying these. I mean, we do that for a lot of existing Unicode symbols already. So that's something where I imagine we'll just be expanding that list over time. So it's definitely not something I'd recommend as a strategy going forward, not something that I'd recommend like putting a lot of energy into and adding this to your websites.
Adding 5 stars to every query on your website.
I mean, it's a lot of work, and essentially soon they just won't be shown at all, so it's kind of like wasted time. So you might as well focus on something that gives you more long-term results, and maybe there are things you can do to improve the quality of your website overall rather than just mess with the snippets.
Can you tell us anything about Twitter and the results coming soon?
Twitter, yeah, I see Twitter in the results all the time. I don't know if there's anything special coming up there or when something will happen there, but I mean, Twitter is a normal web page. We show them in search, right?
Yeah, but you partnered now, and it's going to be more results.
I don't have any information there, so
okay.
Sorry.
Hey John, can I squeeze one in here as well?
Sure.
I've recently received some of Matt Kutz's videos from a few years ago. He was giving this example to multiple conferences about the thumb drive and how you can refer to it in different ways, like a flash drive, USB stick, and all those things. And it's very useful for Google to integrate all of these synonyms on your web page. Obviously, this has changed. Google, I think, now is much better at understanding topicality, especially with Hummingbird. but is it also true for international queries or international content? Because I've seen, for example, for Romanian content, that sometimes Google is not picking up synonyms really well. So is it more important to kind of include those words in the content, especially for e-commerce websites where the content is, especially on categories, you have rather thin content. So maybe we could include more words to kind of give Google a better idea about what the page is about and topic and everything.
I don't know for sure, but we are working on trying to understand more, or like all of the languages better. So if you see specific examples where we're not picking that up properly, it would be great to have those examples. I know this is something that we had for some languages where it was really tricky to understand the query, or like for Japanese or Chinese where we get the word boundary wrong if people were searching like that. And this is something that our systems need to kind of be adapted to over time. So if you're seeing specific issues around that for Romanian or any other language, I'd love to have those examples. I know the team is really keen on getting those examples and kind of resolving that problem, so you don't have to resort to like manually figuring out which synonyms to show there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sounds good.
All right, with that, we're out of time. It's been great having you all here, and I hope I was able to answer some of your questions. It was good to see some new faces here as well. And we have more Hangouts lined up for this week, so maybe we'll see you later this week or in 2 weeks again.
Thanks, John. Have a good day.
Have a great week. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, John.